So if you step on a dog's tail and the dog screams from its mouth, what's bothering the dog? Is it the tail or is it the mouth? Well, of course it's the tail. The same thing happens in your body. When you suffer from these particular symptoms, low energy, fatigue, digestive problems, brain fog, poor memory, pain, weight gain, you can't lose weight, allergies, and hormone irregularities, all those are just a symptom of something going on wrong inside your body. And these are the things that happen that cause these particular issues here. So if we're looking over here, we're just treating the symptom. But we want to get to the root cause of the problem and treat the real problem. And all these issues here belong to the category of insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is a situation where your body basically gets mad at insulin. And this is a really big problem because when your body gets mad and resists the insulin from these particular problems, these are the results. So what do? Let's start by understanding some of these reasons why we get insulin resistance. But even before we do that, let me explain what insulin resistance is. Insulin resistance happens like this. When you eat food, particularly too much food, especially carbohydrates, but it also includes proteins and fats. When you eat too much food, your body produces excess insulin. Now, the job of insulin is to be able to take the sugar, the carbohydrates, and the fats and proteins and take it down to your cell, right? There's a cell right there in your body. So your body will take the food, the sugar, the fats, and proteins, and come into your body. Your pancreas makes insulin. So let's say, for example, if it's a carbohydrate, the carbohydrate will come down to the cell, and we call that glucose, right? When carbs are in your blood, we call it glucose. That glucose travels down to your cell, and there's a doorway right here. In order for that carb to go into your cell, you need the insulin here. So the insulin is made in your pancreas, and it's secreted in the blood, and it comes to the cell when it senses the carbohydrates there. So the insulin comes, it's like a key. The insulin's a key. The insulin goes into the lock, and it turns the lock, and the lock opens up and allows the carbs to go into the cell. In insulin resistance, what's happening is that carbohydrate comes down here, the insulin comes down here, it comes down too much. So the body cells can't deal with all that insulin and all those carbs, so we say that it resists the insulin. I kind of use the analogy of a bouncer. If you've ever been to a nightclub and you go to the club and there's a big guy, a muscular guy, he's watching the club, there's nobody crazy coming in. That's the same thing that happens with your cells. We have this bouncer here at the cell membrane, the cell door, and it's protecting the cell from having too much insulin. So the bouncer gets upset when too much insulin and too much sugar and too much food is coming down to it, so it rebels against that insulin. What happens after that is that insulin can't get into the cell, and the sugar cannot get into the cell as well. So the cell doesn't like that. The cell needs the sugar in the form of carbohydrates and fats and proteins to be able to make energy. We like to have energy, but the carbs have to get into the cell to do that. And the key is the insulin, but the cell is resisting the insulin. So the first thing that happens when you have insulin resistance is a symptom of being hungry all the time or having an excessive craving for some type of food. Usually it's sugary foods, but not always. It's just want to eat more because your cell wants to make energy, but it doesn't have it from the foods because it's being blocked because the bouncer is upset and he's keeping the sugar and insulin out. So the cell sends a signal to your brain and it says, hey, Mr. Brain, I need some energy. I need more food. Even though there's enough energy in the form of sugar and carbs in your blood, there's enough fat, there's enough protein there because you're eating, but it's being resisted. So the brain sends a signal to your digestive system and to your intestines to eat more food. And that starts the vicious cycle. Again, so you start to get really ravenously hungry all the time. The second thing that happens is you get low energy and fatigue. Why? Again, because your cell is not absorbing the carb and the food to give it energy, so the energy goes down low and you feel tired all the time. And especially a key to insulin resistance is if you're craving different foods and you feel tired no matter how much food you eat, no matter how much rest you get, you still feel tired because your cells aren't getting the energy. So that's a problem. And that is caused by, again, it's all foods, but especially excess refined carbohydrates. And there's so much confusion out there about what an excess refined carbohydrate is. So what we're going to do is we're going to define what an excess refined carbohydrate is in our class. We have a class coming up. It's called Destroy Insulin Resistance in 30 Days. And you can go to fixyourinsulin.com and sign up for that class. And it's a free masterclass, and we're going to teach you what excess refined carbohydrates are and how to avoid them. So that's one big thing that happens that leads to all these problems here. Okay, the next thing, deficiency of nutrients and ATP. What is ATP? It's just a fancy term. That is the term we use to describe the energy molecule that you make from the foods you break down. When you break down foods in your cell, you make ATP energy. So we like ATP energy. Part of the problem is that we have excess carbohydrates, excess fats, excess proteins in our body, and that doesn't get absorbed. So now the body is in an energy deficient state, even though it has plenty of energy in it, meaning that you're not making the energy in your cells. So that now the excess carbohydrates and the excess proteins and fats don't get into the cell, so what do? They're floating around in your bloodstream. So what do? They go in your bloodstream, and the body goes, ooh, I can't have too much sugar in my blood, or I will go into a coma, or I'll become diabetic. So your body tries to protect itself, and it takes the excess carbohydrates, excess fats, and proteins, and it takes it to your factory of your body. There's an organ in your body. It weighs about 4 pounds. It's your body's factory. That particular organ is called the liver. So your liver is your organ system that helps to deal with all these excess foods. In other words, when you have too much carbohydrates, too much fats, too much sugar in your bloodstream, and the cells rebelling, you have insulin resistance, now all those extra foodstuffs goes to the liver, and the liver tries to take care of it for you. So one of the first things the liver does, it converts your carbohydrates into a stored form we call glycogen. So that's a form of sugar that's stored in your liver. The liver has little closets, if you would. These closets store the glycogen. That's the sugar. Now, the liver also stores the fats in the form of triglycerides. You may have heard of triglycerides as a test in your blood. And when you have high triglycerides in your blood, it's a sign you have too much fat in your body. And most of the fat that you get in the form of triglycerides actually comes when the liver starts to store the glycogen, and then those closets for the glycogen get filled up. So now what happens? The body now takes the extra glycogen and extra sugar and converts it into triglycerides. So now a person is borderline diabetic. That's another definition of insulin resistance. You're kind of borderline diabetic, or maybe you're full-blown diabetic. So let me just back up and say, if you're full-blown type 2 diabetics, you have insulin resistance, definitely. If you're a borderline diabetic, where your A1C is, about 5.4, 5.5, then you're getting into, you still have insulin resistance. Insulin resistance precedes or comes before full-blown diabetes, sometimes years before. Now, not everyone who has insulin resistance becomes diabetic, but everyone who's diabetic has insulin resistance. And if you do have insulin resistance and you're not diabetic yet, you're on that road. So you want to get off that road. And you can get off that road. We can teach you how to get off the road of getting diabetes by going to fixyourinsulin.com and signing up for our free masterclass. So you might be saying, so Dr. Chadwick, I have these symptoms over here, a lot of these symptoms, and I have these things going on in my body. So what? What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is, first of all, you feel lousy all the time. That's a big problem. But also, too, the insulin resistance leads to premature death. It takes at least 6 years off of your life, even up to 10 years off of your life. And if that's not bad, we know that insulin resistance is the #1 cause of heart disease. Heart disease is the #1 killer in this country. It kills 1 out of 2 people. So it is a big deal. If you care about yourself, you care about your family, and you want to be healthy, you got to stop doing what you're doing. You got to get unconfused. My purpose, my lifelong mission is to help my patients, and I've helped tens of thousands of patients get healthier, feel better, get rid of all these symptoms with particular programs to help them. And I unconfuse them, and I'll unconfuse you too if you come to my free masterclass. Now, going back to this. So we have a deficiency of nutrients, ATP. So we need, not only do we have an issue with the bouncer in the cell membrane resisting the insulin, But when we eat a lot of refined, processed foods, we don't get enough nutrients. It's those nutrients that allow the body to make energy also. So we have a double negative with insulin resistance. We have the sugar being blocked going into the cells, and then we have a lack of nutrients in the cells and outside of the cells to also help your body make good insulin, help your insulin work good. You are deficient in nutrients that allows your sugar also to open the door more efficiently. So it's not just the resistance, but it's a deficiency of nutrients. Things like chromium, magnesium, zinc, and more specifically, even simple nutrients like calcium and potassium. Do you know calcium and potassium are the most important minerals when it comes to insulin production? Yes, they are. And they're often overlooked. So we're going to go through that in our class and tell you all about these nutrients that are deficient when that's causing you to suffer from all these problems and that are linked to all these different issues here. Okay, so another real big problem is excess wrong fats or too much saturated fat in your diet. Now, there are some of you who have been on these very, very severe kind of diets, right? You've tried the carnivore diet, or you're on a keto diet, you're on a low carbohydrate diet, and you might feel better. So let me talk about that for a little bit. So you might feel better when you reduce your carbohydrate intake and you eat more fats and proteins, and you will feel better initially because you're reducing the carbohydrates. So the bouncer is going to get less upset, so he's going to let some of the sugar in, and that's what happens. But unfortunately, after a few months of going on a low carbohydrate diet or a carnivore diet, it is not what your body wants. It will do it if you force it to, but if you continue to force it, it's kind of like a teenager or a child you have. You can scare your child. You say, I'm going to, whip you, or I'm going to take away your phone. That's the worst thing, right? Don't take away the cell phone. But if you discipline your child and they get upset, that can become a problem because they can rebel against you too. And you'll control them if you take away their cell phone when they're younger, but as they get older, they just become rebellious and do their own thing. And that's what can happen in your body when it comes to going on these extreme kind of high protein, high fat, low carb diets. They're not good for you in the long term. And part of the reason is because they have the wrong fats, and they have a lot of saturated fat in meats. Why is that important? So if you're on a carnivore diet, if you're on the high fat, high protein kind of diet, like a keto diet, what's going to happen is that your cell membrane is made up of fat, okay? So the cell membrane is made of fat. It's made up of the fat that you eat. So if you're eating a lot of refined, a lot of saturated fat from meats, over time, you're going to change that cell membrane structure. And the cell membrane, like everything in life, needs a balance. We all need balance in our lives. We need balance in our cell membranes. We need balance in the fats that we get. So when we have a carnivorous diet or a ketogenic diet, we get a lot of fat, and that fat changes the cell membrane. So what will happen is that cell membrane will become more rigid. When the cell membrane becomes more rigid, that's not good because the doorway that allows the foods to go into your cell has to go through that fat. And if that doorway is too rigid, the foods can't get in there over time. And that is not good. And when you start to mess with too much fat and eat too much saturated fat, you're going to start to get into immune system problems. You're going to start to get all that fat clogging your arteries and leading to arteriosclerosis and heart disease. So the thing you're trying to avoid and trying to be healthier with these ketogenic diets and these carnivorous diets, in the long run, is a big problem because it leads to more heart disease, and that'll kill you fast. 1 out of 2 people die of heart disease. So don't believe the hype. And I know you're saying, Dr. Chadwick, but I feel so much better. My blood numbers are better, and I'm losing weight, and I feel good. Yes, you will. But wait. 6 months to a year and a half at most, you're going to see everything change around. Why? Because now, not only do you have an imbalance and a stiffer cell membrane from all that saturated fat, but now what happens is that fat starts to penetrate the cell. So when that saturated fat gets in your cell, it does something to you that's not good. You're supposed to have a little bit of fat inside of your cell. But as you're eating these very high-fat diets, you get more fat in your cell, right? You get too much fat in your cell, and that fat sends a signal to the doorway. So another term that we use for the doorway is the receptor. Receptor is just a fancy term that's a doorway, right? So you have a receptor on your cell here that absorbs the sugar, that absorbs the insulin, that absorbs the little receptor here. So that insulin receptor, that one that's supposed to be the parking space or the lock for the insulin, when there's extra fat inside of your cell, it turns that receptor off. That makes you more insulin resistant. So the more fat you get, saturated fat in your diet, the more fat built up in your cell, the more insulin resistance you become. Listen to me. Think about this. If you're diabetic and you're watching out there, or you've on these keto diets and stuff like that, and especially diabetic, if you're diabetic type 2 and you're checking your sugar every day and you're eating a ketogenic diet, you're going to notice that your sugar starts to go up after 6 months and you can't control it. You're saying to yourself, man, I only had protein and fats all day yesterday. How come my blood sugar is 250? It's because the fat that you're eating is inside the cell and it's turning off that cell membrane, the cell receptor, and you're not getting the sugar into your cells, so you're getting more diabetic. That is not good. Okay, the wrong fats. Again, we're going to be talking about what the wrong fats are. Saturated fat, omega-6 fats, omega-3 fats, all those things in our program. Destroy your insulin resistance in 30 days. If you go to fixyourinsulin.com, you can sign up for that. It's a free masterclass. Okay. So the next thing, excess chronic inflammation. So how do we get chronic inflammation? There are many ways, and chronic inflammation is a big one. It's a big one when it comes to insulin resistance. So one of the ways you get chronic inflammation is eating too much saturated fat, and especially too much omega-6 fats. And these are the fats that are found in refined oils. So liquid canola oil, liquid soybean oil, liquid corn oil, even olive oil to some extent. These oils have these omega-6 fats which are inflammatory. They create more inflammation in your cells and they create more insulin resistance because they go into the cell and they also clog up the cells with these bad fats, especially I'm talking about more of the refined type of oils. So if you go to the grocery store, you should never buy liquid oils. That's terrible because those liquid oils, they're already rancid and they're omega-6 oils and they have a lot of chemicals and they're overly processed. So all they're doing is causing more damage to your body and more inflammation. They cause a lot of free radicals and they're very problematic. So never use these liquid oils. You want to avoid excess chronic inflammation. One of the ways is, again, balancing out the fats. And in my program, our 30-day program to destroy your insulin resistance in 30 days, we're going to do a blood test for you. We're going to do a very comprehensive blood test that's going to look at your fat ratios in your body so we don't have to guess. That's our motto. We test and not guess when it comes to your health. Okay, so chronic inflammation happens from these omega-6 fatty acids, but chronic inflammation also comes from number 7 here, from a leaky gut and a poor microbiome. Chronic inflammation comes from infections. So let's talk about these two things. When you get infections in your digestive system, which is very common because we're around a lot of bacteria, a lot of viruses, a lot of parasites around us, and those kind of infections, those pathogens invade our body and they cause the body's cells to talk. And the immune cells specifically, because the immune cells are trying to protect you. The immune cells are what help to break down and get rid of the bacteria and get rid of the viruses and get rid of the parasites, right? Get rid of the fungus or the fungi. So we need to have a good functioning immune system, but the way it works is through these chemicals that talk to each other. But when there's too much bacteria and there's too much talking with your immune cells, that creates chronic inflammation, and that can be a big problem. And the reason that you have a chronic inflammation is because your immune system is weaker and your digestive system is weaker because you're eating the wrong foods and you're not getting the right nutrients. You have a deficiency of nutrients, so your immune system doesn't work as well. So if you're watching me out there and you get sick real easily, every couple of months you're getting cold or flu, you just feel like you have the cold or flu, you have body aches and stuff like that, you say to yourself, man, I feel like I have the flu, but I don't think I do. You go to the doctors, check you don't have the flu, but it's because of your immune system being so bombarded by all these infections and not having enough nutrients to fight off those things. So leaky gut syndrome, which is part of, again, the immune system, and so is infections and immune cells. Those are all involved. When these things start getting out of balance, we get excess inflammation, what will happen is we'll get all these symptoms here, and that's a big problem. So like things like, again, like low energy, digestive problems, brain fog, poor memory, pain, weight gain, you can't lose weight, allergies, hormone irregularities, these come from these things over here. Okay, so another big one here too, I mentioned the fact that we get toxins in the body from the leaky gut in our body. We get actually, our gut leaks and allows different bacteria to slip into it. And these bacteria, unfortunately, get into your blood. Once the bacteria get into your blood, your immune system attacks them and kills them. Great, that's a very important thing. But now the debris from the bacteria being killed goes over to your fat cells. The fat cells have an affinity towards these cell debris from the damage from the bacteria being destroyed. In other words, there's certain substances, we call them LPSs, lipopolysaccharides, just a big fancy word. All that LPS means is that the bacteria got destroyed by your white blood cells and the fragments are floating around your bloodstream and they go and they clog up your fat cells. So now the excess toxins from these LPSs from the bacteria, also these excess toxins come from all the refined foods because the refined foods have extra chemicals in them. They have preservatives and toxins and colorings, and that adds to the excess toxins that clogs up the fat cells. So the fat cells get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they burst open. Once those fat cells burst open, now we got a lot of inflammation. You get arthritis, you get gout, you get diverticulitis, you get all these different itises. Itis is just a name for inflammation. You get inflammation from all this stuff happening in your digestive system that's linked to the insulin resistance. So again, the excess toxins clogging up your fat cells, but we can reverse that. Liver stress is another big one. Liver stress is big. Your liver is your factory. Your liver is your organ that actually breaks down all these toxins in your body. The liver has 500 jobs. So the liver tells your body to store the sugar. It tells your body to store the fat and where to put it. So the liver is directing things in your body. It's your factory. So the excess fat, excess sugar, excess proteins and amino acids, anything excessively, the liver has to handle. But over time, the liver gets stressed. So when the liver has too much sugar in it and too much fat, it starts to get a fatty liver. That's the first thing that happens is your liver, because it's stressed out, it can't metabolize or get rid of the fats. It can't even push them over to the fat cells anymore, so you get a fatty liver. But that's a problem, because if your liver is stressed out, you get fatty liver. That's been epidemic recently. The past couple of years, everybody's been being diagnosed as fatty liver because everybody has insulin resistance and they don't even know it. They don't even know they have insulin resistance and they're getting a fatty liver. The fatty liver is not handled, that becomes, it's called fibrotic. You get fibrosis where you get these scars on your liver. And if that's not taken care of, you get cirrhosis, a cirrhotic liver. That's hardening of the liver. That's dangerous because if you don't take care of that, that turns into liver cancer. So the first step is having a fatty liver. And you know you're having a fatty liver if you have excess triglycerides. If you have more than 100 on your triglycerides in your blood, you most likely have a fatty liver. You don't have to have high liver enzymes. High liver enzymes mean your liver is being damaged, but a high triglycerides means your liver is toxic and it's stressed out. Okay, leaky gut. I mentioned that a little bit before, but leaky gut is a phenomena that happens. We have pores, we have holes inside of our intestinal system. We have a 20-foot long intestinal tract, small intestine and large intestine, and that's how we absorb our food, through these little holes. That's normal. That's normal. Normal absorption takes place as the food is eaten, it's chewed, it's swallowed, it goes into your intestinal tract. The body will, break down the foods as it goes down. It'll break down your carbohydrates into sugars. It'll break down your fats into fatty acids. It'll break down your proteins into amino acids. That's what's supposed to happen. So when they're first eaten, they're big molecules chained together, then they get smaller and smaller and smaller as they travel down your intestinal tract. And then what happens is they absorb through the duodenum in your intestines into your bloodstream. That's absorption. That's normal. In leaky gut, Because of all the poor food choices, the refined foods, the deficiency of nutrients, the wrong fats, you get inflammation in your gut, you get bacteria there, you get SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. That's nothing that happens with leaky gut. So now we have the small holes get bigger. So if you can imagine, you have these real small holes in your intestinal wall, which with food absorbed, that's normal, they stretch out. When those cells stretch out, then we say that the other toxins and other things that should not get into your bloodstream leak in. That's where the lipopolysaccharides leak in. That's where bacteria leak in. That's where you get allergies from too. If you get a lot of mucus in your nasal cavities, it's not from the environment. It's from your digestive system not being able to handle the foods because they're so toxic and so refined, and you get extra mucus here that travels this way when you lay down at night. It goes up to your nasal passages, so you get nasal congestion. I had a patient recently who I put on one of our programs, and for 20 years, she can only breathe out of one nostril, 20 years. After our program, through our detoxing we did for her, she was able to breathe out of both nostrils for the first time in 20 years. And we didn't touch her nostrils. We gave her a detox for her intestines, and her nostrils opened up because all that's connected to there. Anyway, so going back, leaky gut, microbiome, that's a big one. The microbiome is your good bacteria that's found in your intestines. We want to have a good, healthy microbiome. We get a good, healthy microbiome by eating a good, balanced diet with a lot of vegetables and fruits. And if you're on a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, you basically destroy your microbiome over time because the meats and the heavy fats do not feed your microbiome. Your microbiome is fed from vegetables and fruits and the fiber that's there and the phytonutrients and all these things in fruits and vegetables that feed your microbiome. But what we do is we give you a personalized eating program based on our blood test. And we'll teach you more about that again. If you go to fixyourinsulin.com, you can sign up for our free masterclass. It's going to be on Zoom and on Facebook Live. It's called Destroy Insulin Resistance in 30 Days. We're going to teach you how to do that. Okay, so going back, I mentioned leaky gut. So there's some issues with that there too. And we're also going to check you for infections because there are a lot of people who walk around with bacterial infections, viral infections, parasites, and fungus, and they don't even know it. So with our sophisticated, very comprehensive blood test, we're able to ascertain if you do have these kind of toxins. Then we use natural herbs. Another thing, if you have insulin resistance, part of the problem, again, is the digestive system and the leaky gut. If you've ever taken an antibiotic, in your whole life, one round of antibiotics, 10 to 14 days, will disrupt your microbiome for at least 6 months, sometimes longer. That's only one round. And many people take them once a year, twice a year, more than that, and that's destroying the microbiome in your digestive system. So we have ways of replenishing the good microbiome with our program. Okay, number 8, the fat cell death. I mentioned that. So what happens is, as your body gets so much food in it, so much sugar, so much carbohydrates, so much fat, so much protein, it can't deal with it. So it turns most of it into fat, into triglycerides, and what we call free fatty acids. Those free fatty acids are made in your liver from those foods, so the carbs get turned into fat. The protein, extra carbs get turned to fat. That goes to your fat cell. Your fat cell gets larger and larger and larger. And as it gets larger and larger and larger, I mentioned before, it bursts open. Now all that garbage in there falls out into your bloodstream. That creates inflammation. But not only that, the fat cell death that comes creates a lot of disorder in your body and creates more inflammation. But the extra fat cells also lead to hormone irregularity. So listen up. If you have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, if you're a female, if you have menstrual problems, menstrual irregularities, painful menstrual periods, long menstrual periods, heavy bleeding, that's a hormonal problem. If you have mood swings and depression, anxiety, that's a hormonal problem. If you're a man, you have man breast, that's a hormonal problem. If you have ED in a man, that's a hormonal problem that comes from insulin resistance. That can be reversed with our program. Again, go to fixyourinsulin.com. So that all those hormone problems stem from the fat. And you know why too? Because your body uses good fat to make your hormones. So the building blocks of your hormonal system, your healthy testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, come from having good fats in your body. But when you have all this extra fat and extra food in your body, it creates these hormonal irregularities. And I'll go more into details at our class. And we have helped hundreds of women over the years to get pregnant by changing their diet, putting them on a program, and giving their body what it needs, and they can get pregnant because they have all these hormonal irregularities that don't come from lack of synthetic estrogen or synthetic progesterone. These hormonal irregularities come from eating all the bad foods. That's what it comes from. Okay, last thing is infections and immune systems. I mentioned that before. Too much bacteria, too much viruses, too many funguses in your body. These things can linger around, especially in your gut, and they can wreak havoc on your immune system cells, and that causes the signaling to happen, which causes more insulin resistance. And again, we'll go more details about that in our free masterclass, Destroy Insulin Resistance in 30 Days. Go to fixyourinsulin.com and sign up there. This is Dr. Aaron Chadwick. I've been practicing natural medicine for 35 years. I have helped tens of thousands of patients, both my wife and I. We are called Your Nutrition Physicians. We are there to help you. We are here to help you. So go to this website right now, fixyourinsulin.com. Sign up for the free class. Please share this video with your family and friends. Have them sign up too. It's free. You're going to learn so much to bless you, to help you, and to get rid of this insidious problem. Insulin resistance is the biggest problem in the world. It's the biggest health problem because it leads to heart disease, #1 killer. Insulin resistance leads to cancer. It leads to hormone problems. It leads to stroke. It leads to vascular problems and hardening of the arteries. It's a big deal. So we can help you get rid of it. Again, this is Dr. Aaron Chadwick. God bless you guys. We'll see you at our free masterclass.